Thank you so much. Patty will be joining us in a couple of minutes. She is actually taking care of the summit right now that is going on at the school. So I would say so I'm at Northwestern University and one other thing, thank you so much, Paul, for the kind introduction and for inviting us. And part of what Paul said, I think you mentioned literary, maybe actually. I would say literacy, but there's like they're kind of overlapping. But I wouldn't call myself a literary scholar. So yeah, the my growth as or trajectory as a scholar has involved connecting with multiple communities of literacy educators and scholars and folks in the learning sciences and also folks in the applied linguistics field. And it's kind of like they all kind of come together in the type of work that I do. Although I have shared and disseminated more of my work in literacy so far. And so I also want to say my collaboration with Dr. Delacruz has gone back a number of years, starting with our conversations around digital literacies and then going to time and space in learning. Patty was doing her dissertation at that time, and she was actually thinking about time space of learning in non-instructional, um, uh, spaces. How do you think about the relationships you build with students in these liminal spaces? So that was a time when we started thinking about the idea of a chronotope, which I'm gonna share a little bit. Um, um, and up to now, we are designing and studying a curriculum on inquiries and storytelling on migration in classrooms. And yeah, so and looking at time and space, elements of that. So I am going to share my screen. Okay. Can you all see the slide?
Yes,
Yeah.
looks good.
Okay, wonderful. All right. So this work is also done, the two projects that I'm going to share uh, are, um, are done in collaboration with Gautam Bisht, Tori Choi, Sijuri Christensen, and Sitlali Morales. Sijuri is at UT San Antonio. Lali is at UIC, University of Illinois, Chicago. Okay. All right. But I just want to trace back a little bit the origin of thinking about space, time, and narrative. And it started with my collaboration with some colleagues at the Medill School of Journalism here at Northwestern. A number of years ago, we did a video documentary project on migration. And the lower image, the lower right image is from that project. We did the project at a high school, and my colleagues co-taught the in the classroom with teachers at the school, and it was from that project that I became, inspired or attuned to the idea of time and space in storytelling from an artistic standpoint, right? From an artistic perspective, interacting with these folks who do filmmaking and documentary making. And then I was also trying to connect that with ideas in the social sciences and in language studies and literacy studies around space and time, chronotype and scale, to think about the ideas and can kind of positioning of the young people, their development and their learning through this kind of storytelling. So that has influenced some of my other work. Let me see. So with this interest in space, time, and narrative, I've been analyzing data from that my colleagues and I developed in another study of the transnational digital literacies in the everyday lives of Chinese and Mexican youth. In working, with observational data and interviews with the youth, we've taken a spatial temporal lens to listen in and understand their oral narratives, what they said in their interviews, right? As a form of narrative making about their transborder digital communication. And from this work, actually, we are drawing some ideas for our current project with Patty around inquiry and storytelling on migration. So it's this kind of iterative back and forth movement. So today I want to talk briefly about the Transnational Digital Literacies Project, and then Patty and I will present some ongoing work in the classroom. Okay. Okay. So in recent years, research of the everyday practices of youth who experience transnational migration has reframed our understanding of language literacy and youth identity as related to ongoing movements and connections across territorial boundaries, rather than solely or primarily anchored in a single national context. New communication technologies have amplified the salience of digital media for young people, digital media spaces, for young people who seek to maintain relations with family, friends, and other networks across borders. The concept of transnationalism serves to characterize the interlocking social networks and relationships across borders, the practices that mediate these relationships, and their meanings and impact for people. And for many migrant families and children, their ongoing social, cultural, and emotional affiliations with their native country or NATO country are facilitated through practices of communication that scholars have termed transnational literacies, the reading, writing, and multimodal communicative practices of people who are involved in activities that extend across national boundaries. So in this first study, I'm going to describe, we explore the transnational literacies that contribute to creating online social connections that may support young people's development and navigation of life across countries. Specifically, we seek to understand how the youth narrate their experiences of cross-border lives, how they locate themselves in transnational spaces and times, and how we take inspiration from this learning in the way we design and study educational environments. The larger research project incorporated observational and survey methods to learn about how youth of Mexican and Chinese heritage engage with digital media in their experiences of migration and movement across countries. We conducted a media use survey, how they use media, with 292 youth of Mexican and Chinese descent who were immigrants or children of immigrants attending an urban high school in the Midwest of the US. From a series of focus groups with survey participants to explore further their digital media use, we recruited 19 youth to participate in the observational part of our study, which took place in the youth's homes. We visited the youth on multiple occasions and video recorded and interviewed them about their activities. In the media use survey, we found that frequency of communication with friends and family living outside the US was positively related to the youth's sense of social connectedness. Our measurement of social connectedness assessed perceptions of connections to others, active involvement with different people and topics, and the ability to keep in touch with family and friends. Additionally, we found that youth who had spent more time living outside the US, who are often new immigrants, right, communicated more frequently with friends and family living both within and outside the US, compared to adolescents who were born in the US. So in a series of analysis, we have explored the space-time dimensions of digital literacy practices that contribute to the youth's sense of connection. In particular, how the youth create the spatial temporal context, a frame of reference for their actions and positionings with others across geographical distances. So we have explored this question in a couple of papers, and I want to share a recent paper with my colleague Sijuri Christensen, who is shown in the screenshot image on this slide. And Sijuri actually made a short video for the article that we published in TESOL Quarterly. And the article focuses on the digital literacy practices of 2 Latino youth in our study. I want to kind of describe the study to give you more of a nuanced, kind of hopefully a more grounded sense of how youth engage in their sense of connection across countries. And we build on the concept of chronotope, as you can see in the title of the paper, to explore space-time context in meaning making. Chronotope is kind of jargony, but the part chrono is time, and tope refers to space. So the idea of chronotope refers, kind of is used to think about the narrative or interactional organization of time and space in human activities. Okay. So educational scholars have used this idea in their work for a while already, and they examine, using this idea, they examine how time and space are not a backdrop for activity, but are actively produced and mobilized for meaning making in literacy activity. In the paper, we noted that Mikhail Bakhtin, who was a philosopher of language and literary critic, used the term chronotope to describe the, quote, intrinsic connectedness of temporal and spatial relationships, unquote, depicted in literature. And in so doing, as Anna Defina, who is a sociolinguist, said, quote, capture the idea that humans tend to experience and understand reality within specific time-space contexts, unquote. So a chronotope is the configuration of time and space wherein events occur and by which events are contextualized. And of interest to us in this study is how chronotopes afford particular historical and geographical references for contextualizing people's actions and ideas of themselves. And we find it interesting to think about these time-space frames in relation to migration and transnationalism. And we were interested in the multiple ways in which spaces, locales, and historical times and memories can be invoked in transnational relations, and how these different spatial temporal framings, or chronotopes, may affect how young people develop knowledge and position themselves. So in this paper, we focus on two youth of Mexican descent, Alessandra and Victoria, who were 17 years old at the time. Alessandra was born in the US and visited Mexico regularly as a child. She had rich memories of time spent with her cousins there and stayed up to date on how they were doing via Facebook posts and photos. Alessandra followed Latinx and Mexican YouTubers based on her interest in their lifestyles. Victoria came to the US at age 10. She continued to communicate regularly with some of her extended family members and friends in Mexico via Facebook and Messenger. On the platform, she paid attention to the goings on in her hometown through their pages and photos, and would sometimes observe memes about political issues in Mexico. Okay. So the data we analyzed included field notes and verbatim transcripts of recordings from our observations. We did open and focus coding of data that involved the youth's connection with or description of people, places, and activities across national borders. In this process, we attended to how the youth described the time-space configurations of people, places, and activities, which led to emerging ideas about chronotopic frames related to family, hometown, and transborder experiences that involve movement and imagination, right, across territorial boundaries. In our focus coding, we attended to how the youth described their actions and positioned themselves to others in these spatial temporal domains. I'll talk about each of these spatial temporal frames or chronotopes now. I want to mention that both youth chose to speak primarily in Spanish in our interviews. Our colleague who visited them and their family and did the observations is bilingual, so they had an option to speak whatever language they felt comfortable. Both youth were fluent in English too. The family chronotope creates, here you go. The family chronotope creates space for participants to engage in the immediacy of family dynamics and co-construct ongoing family histories by writing themselves into the experiences of their family in Mexico. For Victoria, we saw this happening through her description of her online conversations with her extended family. For example, her uncle, who was close in age to her, as shown in this example. My uncle asked me if I've eaten, what I'm doing, or he tells me that he got a promotion or that I need money, then he sends me some. He'll say, when are you going to send me money? He always asks how I've been doing or what I have been doing, or how are you? Or try hard in school. Or he'll say, I saw you in that picture and you were doing something, and it's great that you're bettering yourself. It motivates me to keep doing well. So this example shows how they engage in care work, right, and performed and sustained familial relationships. In the process, they were also, Victoria and her uncle, were also playing with societal scripts of migration, right, involving directions of remittances, so sending money back or sending money here, right? Compared to Victoria, Alessandra communicated less frequently with her family members in Mexico, and yet she created storylines of her cousins and other family members through observing their posts and photos online, and developed her own familial knowledge in the process. Here, Alessandra was showing Lali, our colleague, some old photos on Facebook from when she was a child. She paused over one to point out members of her family at her uncle's wedding. Her narrative shows how she was following their updates and posts. And Alessandra's use of language is interesting here. She used a reflexive third-person pronoun. She's the one, from the quote here, the last line, she's the one who is going to get married on us. that indicates how she affiliated herself with the family event, even though it would be taking place far away, right? Within the family chronotype, the youth created storylines of their family history and relationships based on photos and online interactions with their family members in Mexico. In the hometown chronotype, Alessandra and Victoria used photos and videos to keep up with what was going on in their hometowns, places, landmarks, people, and events in their town. These digital artifacts came from first-person posts and witnessing from their family members besides official or internet sources. They use these videos and posts to relive memories and construct ongoing understandings and relationships with their hometowns. And here are some examples that indicate that, right? Show us that they were constructing these ongoing relationships. And the youth were describing their hometowns while showing videos to our colleague. And here is Alessandra speaking, talking about the church, the store of a lady. She used to play there, spend money. And this is new. It wasn't that nice. I think right now they're fixing it because they're making it a tourist attraction. It's growing. They're making it grow. So she is observing ongoing changes and also connecting those changes to larger structural factors. Here's Victoria speaking, like in this video about the bread parade. Although the sense of community is not as visible, they do have something to bring everyone together. Like parades like this, even if it's like this, you can feel safe in your same town. And that way you are not always inside or going from the house to run errands or from running errands to the house. Here, Victoria is hinting at the concern for safety in the community, and she talked more about it in our interview. Through their narrative in response to posts and videos, the young people were situating themselves as witnesses to their hometown history that is also related to broader level issues, and in the process, renewing their sense of affinity and participation. Okay. The youth's narrative accounts also show that they were positioning themselves in transborder spaces, not anchored in the US or Mexico, where they embodied and navigated multiple varieties of Spanish and engaged with experiences that cross national borders. And there are multiple ways in which we, as kind of understanding how they do this. They made their own geographically ambiguous videos. They talk about transborder personalities like Latin YouTube content creators that they followed, and they also followed local news outlets that target Mexican culture and Mexican issues. For example, Alessandra followed US-based Latina YouTubers who foreground their Spanish-speaking personas and transnational lives. In our interviews, Alessandra created a narrative of herself that was in dialogue with these Latina YouTubers. And in this excerpt, Alessandra was explaining that she followed Prigel, a young couple from California who made videos in Spanish about their lifestyle and travel adventures. And Alessandra is talking about how she talks like them, like the two personalities here, in that her accent cannot be located in one space or one place, right? So this is just one example of how she kind of created this transnational imaginary that crosses boundaries and traverses time and history. Okay, so overall in this case study, we posit that the youth draw from multiple chronotopic frames to position themselves and renew cultural memories, social relationships, language practices, and knowledge across borders. The family, hometown, and transborder chronotopes are some focal points of analysis to help us understand how the youth construct particular space-time contexts and vantage points for developing the transnational identities and knowledge. We also see a range of artifacts, cross-border communication, digital posts, videos, photos that serve as narrative resource that the young people used to construct these spatial temporal frameworks to position themselves and others. This study highlights for us the role of transborder figures, people who have, like the YouTube content creators, who have crossed multiple borders and maintain transnational ties, and how these figures, what role they play in the youth's digital practices, and how they serve as textual mentors or mentor, if you look at the artifacts as mentor texts in the youth's narrative making and imagination. Our analysis of these data is ongoing. We are extending the concept of chronotope to look at multiple spatial and historical contexts, how multiple historical contexts or layers of time and space are organized in a chronotope when youth narrate their migration experiences. We have drawn from some of these ideas in our current work in the classroom. So we wanna transition to how some of these ideas apply to studying youth's migration storytelling in the classroom. Patty, you wanna go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Dr. Lim, I think I'm gonna project. Yes, to share this screen, if that's okay with you. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. I'm so sorry. Is that sharing with you now? Oh, yes.
Oh, you want to close the slides or?
Oh, yes, that's okay. Would you mind?
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yes, it won't allow me to share with.
Okay, I will close the slides and you can,
Okay, thank you so
much. Sorry about it.
No, not at all. Thank you. Thank you. My apologies, everyone, for the little tech difficulty. Okay, hoping that that's sharing with everyone. Okay. Yes. All right. Thank you so much. Well, thank you, Dr. Lam, so much. And hello, everyone. My name is Patty Minegishi Delacruz. I have the privilege of working with Dr. Lam and two of the graduate students in this SB department. And we have been working together for quite some time now. I am an English and reading teacher at a large Chicago area township high school. In collaboration with my fellow researchers, we've been engaged in an ongoing study at the high school that I currently serve in. Today, we want to share a bit about an ongoing study in a high school setting where students have engaged in inquiries and storytelling on migration. Our research team developed a curriculum unit with the aim to support students in thinking about migration across multiple contexts as students develop their storytelling projects of a migration figure of their own choice. In view of the dominant and pernicious discourses of migration that rest on racialized and exclusionary logics of national belonging, what Harsha Walia calls the bordering regime of migration, we explore how participants in a high school class mobilize time-space movements as semiotic resources to construct transnational positionings and engage with the phenomena and politics of migration. I apologize. Thank you. We build on a body of research in the field of language and literacy learning that examines how educational practices support young people to create written and multimodal narratives on migration that draw from their experiences and transnational perspectives. The work shows that youth stories of family bonds and tracing or remembering their lives and movements across countries serve to create social and cultural connections in their own identities, while making visible the knowledge they derive from diverse places and communities. One aspect of youth storytelling that a few studies have illuminated is the role of time and space in narratives of migration. These studies show how youth disrupt the linearity of time and space in portraying their physical and metaphorical or imaginary movements across geopolitical borders. In Sepulveda's work with Mexican migrant youth, he analyzed how the act of remembering their past lives and journey of migration supported the youth to develop simultaneous vantage points to reflect on their lives and challenge constructs of legality, citizenship, and belonging. Dutra and Hebrel studied the writings of children in a second grade classroom and discussed how their writings involved moving flexibly across time and place, blending the limits of linearity and geography that impose separation, end quote, as seen in their writings about dreams of visiting and physical visits to Mexico. While these studies noted the dimension of time and space, it wasn't the focus of theorization in their work. In this work, we want to further conceptualize youth's border crossing narratives by building on the semiotic concepts of chronotope and scale. As Dr. Lamb already provided, and as just a quick recap on that earlier discussion about chronotope, chronotope refers to the time-space configuration of discourse and how the invocation of particular times and spaces support and make visible aspects of people's personhood and their agency or possibility of actions. Chronotopic analysis allows us to explore how time and space are configured in narratives to create images of characters, their actions and relations, their movement, and their embedded values. We are also interested in how different scales of space and time are organized and configured in a chronotope to support particular subject positionings and character development. Scale has been used to examine the multi-contextual nature of social activity and how the norms and practices that are associated with different times and spaces, historical, geographic, institutional, can be drawn upon to make sense of experiences. Along with other researchers, we are interested in how people create chronotopes that link events and practices across multiple time spaces in their narratives. In the larger project, we are connecting ideas of chronotope and scale to theories of border crossing. And we are referring to Mignolo, thinking from particular places, exterior to the colonial imagination and border epistemology. Gloria and Zaldua next and theorizes storytelling as an art through which border crossers, Nipanslars, merge and connect their multiple lineages across time and space to disrupt colonialist notions of racial difference, exclusionary boundaries, and binaries, such as an other insider. The power to shift, as Andajula argues, to move across geographical and social positions is a creative force for developing new ways of seeing and understanding oneself and others. We are interested in how these processes of shifting and connection happen across multiple scales and how these spatiotemporal scales are configured in a narrative. I implemented the unit that my fellow researchers and I developed in my sophomore English class in December 2022 to February 2023. The class included students who identified themselves or their families as immigrants and also youth who did not hold this identity. So the classroom setting offered an opportunity for us to study how youth from different backgrounds create and interact around stories of migration. The migration storytelling unit centered on recognizing students' capacities as storytellers and really fostering for them their consciousness towards their power as storytellers who can cross boundaries at multiple scales. This curriculum really prioritized elevating youths and their families' migration experiences as cultural and political funds of knowledge, really fostered the learning about migration as a societal and global phenomena and issue, and helped the class community develop new ways of knowing and being afforded by movement and border crossing. The migration storytelling unit began with recognizing the multiple places in the world we are connected to through a discussion about geography. We then explored a multimodal text, an episode of the docuseries Taste the Nation, particularly the episode Burritos at the Border, that chronicled the borderland experiences of the community members in El Paso and Ciudad Juarez. In conversation with our study of this multimodal text, students developed their storytelling voices through prompts that invited them to describe their understanding of migration and their memories around food and celebrations that might reflect their cultural identities. We then engaged more deeply in one case study of a migration figure, Yanis Atantapunko, who is featured here on the slide, who is publicly recognized for being a Nigerian Greek professional basketball player of the Milwaukee Bucks and one of the most decorated players in the NBA. We utilize a critical perspective to understand the social positionality of Atantapunko and other speakers in his stories, as well as the broader cultural and political context that have informed Atantapunko's migration. Students demonstrated their various negotiation of issues around race, class, migration practices, and how systems of power at play throughout Atantapunko's migration story through reading multiple texts, discussing with peers, and engaging in whole class discussions. We use Atantapunko's story as a mentor text and as a scaffold to develop students' own migration stories around a migration figure of their choice. In this slide, you can see here that the students were engaged in different forms of sharing with one another, using Padlet, a very particular modality of storytelling and community sharing. In terms of our methodology, we collected audio recordings of the class, ethnographic field notes, and students' process writings and other literacy artifacts, including digital copies of the final storytelling projects. We conducted interviews with participating students after the end of the unit in April and May of 2023 to learn about how they developed their migration stories and their reflections on both their migration stories and their experiences in the class during this curriculum. In one line of analysis, we have been studying the work and stories of 3 students and who have experienced migration. We asked the question, how do the time-space configurations in the youth stories create particular transnational positionings and geographical references to engage with dominant ideologies of migration and national belonging and border enforcement?
Patty, can we go down one slide more? Oh,
Oh,
one more
yes.
slide. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Good.
Yes.
So, yeah. Thank you so much. So this is a question in one set of analysis we are doing. Okay. And these are actually images from the students' work. Okay. So I will share briefly. How much time do we have? I will share briefly the work of one of the students to kind of show what this kind of meaning making, sense making, and identity development that the youth showed in her story. Do you want to, Patty? Do you want to
Yes,
do
of course. Yes.
do the slide? Okay. I won't be okay seeing the slide. Let me see. All right. Okay, I'm a little challenged. I don't see the slide now.
We're on Yuri's side.
Your slide. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, here you go. All right. Wonderful. Okay. So Yuri came from the Philippines. She moved with her mother and 2 siblings 2 years prior to our project. She was 15 years old at the time of our during the time of the class project. And she noted in her process documents that she wanted to do a story about herself because, this is a quote from her. I picked myself because I want to know myself more, and I want to learn more about the choice my mom chose for me. In her storytelling, she created a hand-painted picture, drawing, and also a written narrative. So this is her drawing, and she has two neighborhoods on the right and the left, right, and with different shapes and sizes and colors of houses in the row, like neighborhood on the right side, which is her hometown in the Philippines, which she portrays as her hometown in the Philippines. And layered on top, the map of the Philippines. Oh, not yet. Patty, can we go back? Yeah, I'll let you know when yeah, thank you so much. On the, so yeah, and the map of the Philippines and the flag design, right? Layered on top. On the left side is her neighborhood in the in her current place of residence, and with the geographical outline of Illinois. And the airplane is moving. I don't know if it's moving you, but it is there. And far end of the runway is are some tall buildings. You probably can make out a little bit, some tall buildings shaped in the letters USA. Okay. We can go to the next slide. So here's what she wrote. My poster board represents my migration story. As you can see on the left, that's my current neighborhood where there are only two houses that are near our house. My house is in the middle. On the right is my neighborhood in the Philippines where houses are really near to each other and have different sizes, shapes, and distances to each other. The airplane represents my moving from my home country to the USA. As you can see, building shape is like USA when an airplane is going. I feel like the airplane is representing me more than me moving because the airplane is still close to its origin. It's not moving closer to the USA, but it's close to both the neighborhoods I drew. Meaning I'm still close to my house. Illinois is in the US, but that doesn't mean I can't be close to Illinois as a person, specifically in Evanston, where my friends, family, and teachers live. This means Illinois is also my home like the Philippines. I said I'm not that close to America yet because my Filipino is still within me and it will always be. If we go to the next slide. So she's kind of portraying the spaces as kind of indicating the relationship, the social relationships she has with these different neighborhoods, right? And the built environment. And by positioning herself through this visual image, she is connecting, her positioning connects two localities, and she's redefining or defining what movement means to her. Movement as, if you think about time space as involving movement, as double presence, right, and connection between her two homes. And the buildings in the USA shape show, in her interview, Yuri talks more about it, show the perception of dominance. The US is known to be a dominant country, right? And it indicates, and she's not that close to it, right? And she may not be moving toward this dominant image of the USA. And it shows to us the scale of nationhood and belonging, right? With this kind of with the image. And also indicating the exclusionary logics of American belonging. She said in the written part, because my Filipino is still within me. So she's kind of contending with these narratives of belonging, the dominant one being more assimilational, right, and exclusive. We can go to the next one. Okay, I'm not going to read through this. I don't expect everyone to read through this. I just want to say in the written narrative, she actually fleshes out. She talks more about, describes more about her hometown. She talks about the space outside. She would be outside a lot with vehicles passing, people walking, trees to climb. Her daily life and rhythm, my everyday agenda was to wake up, eat breakfast, go out to meet my friends. She describes the people and characters of the other children, friends she played with, and the elders, aunties who look out for them. Her actions, what she would do in this space, playing, running, jumping, even climbing trees to get fruits, whatever an American will never think a kid can do. Okay. And from the portrayal, she kind of shows or kind of indicates the values, and this portrayal embeds, I think, the values regarding childhood and neighbors and social community, and also the values of respect that she talks about a little more in the next paragraph. So within this time space, time space context of her hometown, she is constructing an alternative childhood, her servicing her understanding of an alternative childhood. And she said in the interview, she would play with peers who were 16, 17 years old in the same space. Next slide, please. Okay, here she talks a bit more about the communal aspect of her hometown. Okay, I'm looking at the time. Let's go to. I asked her how it felt, writing this, as a really general question. It felt like I'm going back to when I was a kid, like I'm free and I'm outside playing with my friends. I just felt like I went back to remember what it is when I was in the Philippines. Yeah, and while you were, I said, and while you were writing it, she said, yes. I feel like, oh, I did this. It just felt like I did these things. So we are understanding from her from the interview that she uh, is telling us that, in a way, she's bringing this historical memory of her town to the present, and in the process surfacing her subjectivity and agency, a sense of agency. Okay. Next slide. Further on up, yeah, thank you. In the next part of the written narrative, she talks about why she and her family immigrated to the US, talking about the broader scale ideology and structural factors of migration. Her family migrated for economic reason and opportunities, and this normative view is seen online as well. And she also talks about the tensions she felt in transitioning to life in the US, the different kinds of cultural norms and social relational values she experienced in the two countries. Okay. At the end, she said, next slide. I see myself going back to the Philippines when the right time comes, when I'm officially financially stable and can live on my own. I want to go back there because it's where I came from, and I feel like I'll be more happy with my family, with my community. So she is also projecting a transnational future. We don't know if this will be her future because she was 15, and but she said in the process documents that she realized through writing this that she values her, the place and the, people she in the Philippines, and then she and from listening to other her peers in the classroom, she realizes a back and forth kind of movement is possible, is imaginable. Okay, and that her difference, that she can develop a more expansive view of her difference as a process of multiple belonging. And if you think about how she kind of wrestles or engages with cultural norms in the US, we think she is kind of constructing this expansive view of herself and her difference. Okay, and last slide, finally. So in conclusion, we think that the chronotype of double presence functions to engage for Yuri, to engage with ideologies of migration, the opportunity narratives, construction of childhood, and logics of national belonging, and to project a transnational future. In this narrative, particularly the time space, the personhood and relationships within this hometown space is fleshed out and used to engage with these ideologies. Yuri actually turned in the bottom image, the bottom drawing when she submitted her work. She went on to do more work on the drawing for a month or and it was actually when we interviewed her that she brought this to our attention, and I was telling her, can you submit this this new iteration of your work. So yeah, okay, so we'll finish with this.
Thank
you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. It looks like we'll probably have time for 1 or 2 questions. Does anyone want to go first?
Hi, Sophie.
Paul, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, this is just so interesting, and I really, really appreciate both of you talking about the sort of politics of migration and how we're trapped in that as opposed to the rich narratives that young people have. So I wonder at the intersection of the two of you, you've got a distinguished researcher and a distinguished educator researcher working on this. How do we think about training teachers to be able to use these techniques so that they can actually unpack the narratives of the kids who are in their classrooms?
Thank you so much for the question. And this is what I've been working on. I'll let Patty take this up, but in just a few seconds. But this is what I've been working on too. And I kind of write this up, and I think about especially the out of school work, right? The out of school work definitely kind of informs how we think about our own work. But how do we share this more widely, right? With educators. Patty, do you have thoughts on this?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. I think our team is also kind of grappling with that question as well, because I think that a part of addressing that broader inquiry is to recognize that teachers, in terms of their pedagogical kind of positioning of themselves in the classroom, have to come into the classroom recognizing all of their students bring a breadth of different social and cultural capital. And so if teachers are already positioning themselves as really wanting to foster a culturally sustaining space, right? That's, I think, a part of that. And then the curriculum itself, I think, offers some really rich opportunities to recognize that stories come from our students in really dynamic ways. And these stories are not just to be regimented, I think, in like one narrative unit, right? But it is actually a really an integral part of them understanding not just themselves, but their connections to their peers, right? And then also the ways in which they can kind of recognize their place in the larger discourse around migration as a shared human experience.
Yeah.
And so I think it really does require both parts, right? The teacher's positioning and also understanding of class culture, and the fullness of a curriculum that recognizes our students, right, as being co-constructors of knowledge, and also broader participants in a larger social system, right, that has talked about migration in a very particular way, but needs to really center migration in more expansive ways. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Well, we are over time, and I know people have things to get to at 1, so I just wanted to thank you again, and if we can give another round of applause. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. It was great to see you, and great to hear from you, Ava and Patty.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much.